Hello everyone and welcome back. I'm Sarah Liz and today I have a beautiful floral card project for you that's surprisingly easy. This took about 20 minutes. I'm starting with a white A2 card panel. This is 100-pound hammer mill cardstock. It's super smooth since we're going to do some ink blending. And then I am using the Hero Arts Wild Columbine stamp set and the coordinating stencils. I'm going to stamp that down with some black pigment ink right in the corner of my panel. I'm letting it hang off very slightly. And then you've got options. I could set this aside to dry, but I'm impatient and I wanted to get blending right away. So I am using some clear embossing powder. This is totally optional. I do like a white pigment ink if I'm going to blend with dye inks. As long as the ink is dry, this will keep the black from smearing into my colors. The heat embossing also really helps that not happen. So I've added it to my little clipboard and I am going to heat emboss that till all of the powder melts, and I'm coming in with my first stencil. There are 4 stencils in this set. The first one is going to color the largest part of our petals, and if you've looked at a picture of a columbine, the middles are pretty white. So there's a lot of stencil covering up that center area. So I'm just coming in with my blending tool right to the centers and I'm blending out. This lets the petals be darker toward the middle and lighter towards the tips and creates a nice gradient of color. I am using the Trinity Stamps Blending Buddies. I love these. They are my very, very favorite blending tools and I've tried lots of them. They're easy to hold, they're easy to clean, they're sort of rounded on the edges, which really helps me to get a good blend. Next, I'm coming in with just a light purple. I'm not trying to turn the flowers purple, but I just want a little depth to my color. So right towards the edges, I'm pulling in the slightest little bit, and then I'll bring the blue back in. When I remove the stencil, you can see we have a lovely blend and it was really easy. This next stencil, again, I'm using the centers of the flowers to line that up and the exact same color of blue. It's going to add some darker spots on our petals and I am just using a slightly heavier hand. It almost makes this look like I blended it. Then I'm coming in with the lightest shade of ink in this color family. Altenew usually comes out with inks in 4 shades of the same color, and I'm tapping most of the ink off of my brush and I am just going over the centers of those flowers to keep them from being too stark white. Next, we're going to come in with a stencil that will color our leaves. I made this card as part of the A Place to Start card making challenge. I'm on their design team. It's an anything goes challenge, but each month they will have an optional twist, and they gave 2 color palettes for the optional twist, and I chose one of them, and there's no green in the color palette. So I thought, what if we used gray? Like what would that look like? Would it work? And actually, I love this. I think it really draws attention to the flowers, and then we're going to add a little pop of color on the right-hand side. And it lets those colors, the ones that were in the color palette they gave us, really shine. I've used my blending buddy again to sort of start in the middle and create a darker shade toward the middle and fade out towards the edges. But because those areas are so small in the stencil, I then came in with my smaller blending brush just to darken that up a little bit towards the middle. This last stencil is for the centers of the flowers, but also to add a little bit of extra dark shading towards the middles of the leaves. And so I am covering up the centers of the flowers, and I'm just going to use my tiny little blending brush to get in there. I will link these brushes below as well. I'm going to ultimately come in later, and I don't even think it's in here. Sorry about that. I'm going to come in with like a yellow marker to do the centers, but you can barely see it because I heat embossed. It filled in most of that area. So those are our flowers all blended. And again, it was super quick and easy. I have an A2 card panel and I want to trim just a little bit off the edge of my card so I can add a colorful strip on the side. And I'm going to take off just a little more than 1/8 of an inch. And then I'm going to set that aside. I'm using 3 colors to blend. This first yellow is about the same color as that strip, But to create a good blend, I need ink there. I need something to blend into. At the top, I'm bringing in my darkest shade of orange, and I'm coming in pretty heavy-handed, and then I will bring in a middle shade of orange right in the center. And the way I have found to get the best blend is to overlap a bunch. So I'm bringing that middle shade down into the yellow at the bottom, up towards the orange at the top. I'll come in with that yellow one more time to smooth that out. This panel looks just a little bit splotchy right now, and that's in part because the ink is still wet, but these are Altenew inks, and I don't know what kind of magic or witchcraft this is. When they dry, they smooth out like magic. That cardstock has a fair bit of texture to it. I don't know where it came from, guys. I don't know. It just was the right shade of yellow. And so even with that texture, this turns out pretty smoothly. I am using a sentiment stamp from the Altenew Build a Flower Sakura Blossom stamp set, and it says, "Wishing you a lovely birthday." And at this point, I've done all this work, and I want to make sure I get it right. So I'm using a piece of acetate, and I'm stamping onto that just to check my placement. And I like it. So I removed the acetate. I can wipe that clean later. And I'm going to stamp my sentiment onto my panel. I am pressing fairly lightly, right? I want even light pressure, and I'll just stamp it twice. That way, those really fine details, especially in like the wishing you and birthday, I don't want to squish them and end up with sort of a funky greeting, and then I'm having to start over or cover it up, and it worked out really well. Here I'm cutting 2 pieces of heavyweight white cardstock to 4 inches by 5.5 inches. And you can see that panel, how all that ink just smoothed out. So I'm going to add that to the far right-hand side of my A2 top folding card base. And then I'm going to use those panels of white cardstock to lift up my floral panel and create just a little bit of dimension between it and our colorful strip. This is the Accent Opaque 120-pound cardstock. I'll link it below. It's out of stock a lot, so I usually have a reminder once a week to look for it. And typically it will come back in stock occasionally, like every month, month and a half or so. And it's really inexpensive. It's like $13 for 150 sheets. I am going to add my lifted panel to the left-hand side of my card base. And to try to make sure I'm not smearing the ink from my greeting or from my flowers, I'm just going to bring in a piece of scratch paper, and I'm going to rub my hands over that, and you can see there was a little bit of ink that came up. And then this is our card. Isn't it pretty? Let me know what you think in the comments. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing, and I will see you next time.